This story begins by showing a luxurious mansion. In it there is someone who is holding a lawsuit. The person called his friend because his child was in trouble and wanted him to solve the problem. While holding the lawsuit letter, the person calms his friend who is a member of the SEO board, because he has connections to sort everything out. The person throws away the lawsuit paper, which makes his assistant surprised, while continuing to convince his friend, if they don't fight in their youth, they won't be able to grow up. His friend thanked him, but his friend was worried about him because he had received a lawsuit letter. This person was surprised by the sudden talk. He didn't feel worried because there were many heroes on guard at his place, which made his place safe. And also inside there he had an electric man on guard. With so many people having superpowers, he didn't worry about anything anymore and everything was under his control. But a moment after he entered his office he felt the presence of someone in the darkness. There was someone wearing a bear mask who said that the person looked happy, with cold sweat, and while saying you. Seeing that person he was shocked because he turned out to be the executioner gang. In a world where criminals can run rampant, he is too dismissive and doesn't seem to know the basic laws of his world. As he slowly stepped back he slowly walked out of the door and ran away from the executioner gang. The executioner gang who saw him started to back away, slowly took out a red iron hand, which was his superpower. The executioner gang wanted him to meet his boss because his boss was an executor who asked him to meet him. The person started to run and scream, but the red iron started to chase him and caught him. There was a badge on the bloody shirt. It turned out that it was the person who was previously caught who was in pain. In front of him there was someone holding an apple and crushing it slowly. He stepped on a photo showing the bribery and infidelity of that person. There were apple fragments scattered around it as bait. The person felt he was too noisy. By sitting with one leg crossed he was like a boss and called him trash. The person began to see clearly the person who was talking about him, and as soon as he saw him, he was surprised to find that in front of him was the most feared criminal known as the executor. The executor started to stand up while wondering why trash seemed to be roaming around and being left behind by the hero. The executor walked towards the person. He was shaking with fear. He couldn't run because his hands were tied behind his back. Then the executor started to sit up and look at him, holding his shoulders while saying that he went there to clean up the rubbish that the heroes could get away with and didn't clean up. The executor started to release his superpower by making his hands glow and his eyes red, while continuing to look at the person with a serious face. Suddenly a green ball came towards the executor. The executor glanced and thought, high-level heroes have come here. Two people slowly approached the executor. They looked nervous and trembling with fear. One person holding a gun asked the executor to stop immediately. The executor began to see green and white rubber bracelets indicating that their rank was low. The executor called them Kim's henchmen from the association while thinking that they were just small potatoes. They were both scared and called the executor a trash criminal. The executor started emitting dark smoke from his feet, which shocked the henchmen. The executor disappeared. One of them, the person who first attacked him, looked up. The executor quickly arrived right in front of him and started attacking his head with his superpower. The executor hit the person's head against the wall, which made the wall have a fairly large crack. The friend who couldn't move because of the speed of the executor started looking back quickly. The executor saw him holding his friend and called them hypocrites. The man fell down with a trembling voice. He mentioned the director. While looking at him, the executor was confused as to what he meant by director. Suddenly someone attacked the executor suddenly while saying good job to the henchman. The executor managed to survive the attack because the executor managed to create a defense from his superpower. The person who attacked him. How does it feel to receive a blow this time? You can see his index hand is shining. The person is called Kim Yi-hoon, the head of security for the hero Han Yeon Kim, who has the ability to air shot. He insulted the executor as a trash criminal and asked the executor, does it hurt? The executor was shocked by the large shot thrown at him, which left him with scratches.
You've come this far, but you didn't leave unnoticed, right?
The executor said while looking sharply at Kim Yi-hoon. They looked at each other and an aura appeared that made them ready to fight each other. Kim Yi-hoon also said insulting words to the executor. When they were ready to fight, suddenly the phone rang from Kim Yi-hoon's pocket. The executor reminded Kim Yi-hoon that his phone was ringing because the executor wanted a fair fight without cheating. Kim Yi-hoon started to rush to pick up the phone and asked the executor to wait a moment. The executor thought that this was a bad habit of a hero, but suddenly the phone rang from his pocket, making them startled. They looked at each other and were confused because the phone ringing had the same song. They both picked up their phones. It turned out that the executor was calling his girlfriend, who was reminded him not to be late. The executor reasoned that he was in a meeting now. Meanwhile, On the other hand, Kim Yoo-hoon was calling his father, shouting for him to get there quickly. Kim Yoo-hoon accepted his father's request to get there quickly. They hung up the phone at the same time. The executor reasoned that something had happened and wanted to leave immediately. Kim Yoo-hoon, who also happens to want to go, feels related to the executor, but the executor is uncomfortable with Kim Yoo-hoon, who pretends to be close to him. The executor with his superpowers left saying he would reply another time. Kim Yoo-hoon denied that because it seemed like they would be able to get along if the executor wasn't a criminal. Behind him the person was scolding Kim Yoo-hoon, who was saying what a shame. The man felt that he should catch the bastard who had just kidnapped him. Kim Yoo-hoon's two henchmen tried to calm him down, who turned out to be a member of the council. Kim Yoo-hoon casually apologized without feeling guilty while taking a cigarette, while the council member was angry because he had even submitted an official request to the association, but the results did not meet expectations. After lighting his cigarette, he was surprised to see a piece of paper. The council member thought that the photo was his, the paper that Kim Yoo-hoon was referring to. The council member took the initiative to hide the photo while continuing to thank Kim Yoo-hoon, but he just casually walked past him. He saw the thing that caught his attention more, a piece of paper that was in a pile of wood. When Kim Yoo-hoon looked at it more closely, he saw that it turned out to be a wedding invitation. Kim Yoo-hoon looked at the invitation and guessed who the actual executor was. A few moments later, the television media started reporting at the scene of the crime about the hero family who managed to save council member Choi, who was kidnapped by the executor. Even this news became the main news. The news showed a place that had been marked so that no one would enter. Inside there was a shadow that was approaching. They talked about this and guessed that he was the head of the family. It turned out that he was indeed the head of the family. He was calling someone to discuss the evidence of the incident at that location. The news anchor tried to ask him several questions. The reporter said that he was from TVC and wanted to ask some questions about the incident that occurred. The head of the family seemed unprepared for the reporter's sudden questions. The head of the family is named Kim Young-sik. He is discussing the crimes of the executor, which are becoming more serious. Because the human population with superpowers exceeds 40%, heroes appear who are tasked with defeating people who abuse their superpowers. The heroes also managed to form an alliance, but instead of decreasing. As a result, more and more villains appeared. With his superpowers, Executor managed to win the fight against the leading villains. Not only criminals, he even managed to kill famous heroes, such as heroes who were under him and were asking for help from the association. With a sharp gaze and seemingly out of control, he managed to defeat everyone who stood in his way, be they villains or heroes, and became known as the most feared villain. Kim Young-sik started to emit smoke from his mouth. With his superpower, namely monster mode, he made his body much bigger than before, saying that he now even dares to target ordinary people. The reporter behind him became nervous while continuing to praise the head of the Kim family, and above them the sound of a helicopter was heard. The residents looked up because they were curious about the sound, which turned out to be the Kim family's private helicopter. A moment later a woman came out of the helicopter, who was Kim Young-sik's wife. His wife asked him to immediately get into the helicopter because they will soon be late. Kim Young-sik then with his superpower jumped towards the helicopter. When he got to the helicopter, Kim Young-sik grabbed the helicopter's leg, which dented the helicopter's leg. Led by the Hanyeong Kim family, the Heroes Association will not remain silent. The residents below thanked and praised the family's kindness. Kim Young-sik's wife wanted Kim Young-sik when he arrived at their house to repair the damaged helicopter leg, which made Kim Young-sik speechless. The reporter below was so impressed that he even forgot that the broadcast was still going on. His colleague reminded him that the broadcast was still going on. After realizing, the reporter continues the news.
Both heroes and criminals, even now civilians, the executors. But as long as the association is still there, we are all safe.
The location changed to the executor, who was looking for his tie in a hurry. His subordinates said that his tie was in the glove box. The executor continued his conversation about the news that was broadcast. The news showed that the fat council member was considered an ordinary civilian. His subordinates wanted to take care of him, but the executor has more important matters now and will take care of them later. While driving an automatically driven jeep, the executor ties his tie and says that today is an important day.
Because today is an important day, I actually want to deal with important people. It's a shame. Hanyeong Kim's hero family really annoys me.
After saying that, he looked at his mask, which was moving. The executor asked his subordinate called Jay to replace the mask filter, and Jay accepted his boss's request and handed it over. Just him. Suddenly a telephone appeared and told his boss that there was a telephone call for him. The executor asked to connect the telephone to him.
Upper, why haven't you arrived yet?
I'm in the parking area now.
While stopping the car,
Is it true?
Of course, I'm never late. This is the first time I've met your family, so can't be late.
The executor brought a souvenir for his girlfriend's family, namely premium fruit and also premium meat. His girlfriend started to greet him by waving at him while calling him Oppa. His girlfriend thought that the executor would be late. In fact, his girlfriend was angry with the executor who was almost late on such an important day. The executor apologized to his girlfriend for being almost late on such an important day. His girlfriend forgave him with a blushing face, which made the executor grateful that he had forgiven him. The executor started holding his girlfriend's hand. The executor and his girlfriend entered his girlfriend's house. The executor asked his girlfriend if she was nervous, and her girlfriend said he wasn't nervous. While showing the blood-splattered image of the executor who was a murderer, the executor's name was Onjarim. He hid his identity. When he saw the woman in the hospital yard, Onjarim's heart suddenly beat fast. Onjarim falls in love at first sight with an ordinary girl he loves, and immediately considers marrying her. When he was about to open the door, Onjarim's girlfriend told Onjarim something that might surprise Onjarim. Onjarim felt that he would not be surprised. He jokingly said, "They're political and business VIP members." Onjarim thought that whoever was behind there would not be as surprising as Onjarim's secret, who is an executor. Onjarim was surprised by her boyfriend's answer, who said more or less like that. Her boyfriend told Onjarim to come in with her because all her family was already inside. Onjarim looked through the gap in the door. Her girlfriend slowly started to open the door. And that was the first time Onjarim met the family, his girlfriend, and when the light started to disappear, Onjarim was surprised by his girlfriend's family, which made him flinch.
Her brother, when you are here, please don't reveal your killing intent. I want you to see my family. Oppa, here they are.
His mother is named Choi Hee and is the wife of the current head of the Kim Hanyeong family. His father is Kim Young-sik, who is the current head of the Kim Hanyeong family. His eldest brother is Kim Haeun, who is the research director of the Hero Association. His uncle is Kim Yi-hoon, who is the head of family security, Kim Hanyeong. And his grandfather was named Kim Ho, the head of the Kim Hanyeong family. Previously, his grandfather apologized to Jae-rim because they had surprised him at their first meeting. Jae-rim was shocked and nervous about the incident. He didn't expect that his girlfriend, Hain, was really the youngest daughter of this family, and thought that this was a trap. But Hain looked at him pitifully and thought that this was too much. He showed his cute face and continued to look at Jaemin. Jaemin asked Hain to come out for a moment and approached the Kim family slowly. After that, Jaemin sighed. And when he raised his hand, it was as if he wanted to grab someone.
It's an honor to meet you for the first time. I'm in Yemen, and I've been dating Hain for 2 years.
Jaemin immediately paid his respects by sitting down and bowing his head. Jaemin's father was surprised, while his grandfather thought that someone who could date his grandson had to be someone who had a spirit like him. Jaemin shows a cunning face, because as executor Jaemin has gone through all kinds of crises in his life. Jaemin gives the gifts he brought to Hain's family. Hain's family accepts them even though Jaemin's presence is enough. Jaemin tells Hain's family that it's just a small gift and it wasn't a hassle to carry it for him. Jaemin held his glasses. With a look full of confidence, he was sure he could, and would continue to hide his identity until he and Hain got married. Jaemin felt that the food here was very delicious, while his grandfather thought that Jaemin was very handsome like when he was young. But there was an uncle there who had an uncomfortable air. Jaemin didn't realize that his uncle Kim Yi-hoon had their marriage certificate, which fell during the previous fight.